Hi everyone, I'm Alicia Albury, a partner in the property team in Sydney. I'm the co-chair of Maddocks Women and I'll be hosting this episode. Today I speak with three special guests, Belinda Chapman, who's an associate in our public law team in Canberra, Jenny O and Donna Paredes. October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month and Belinda, Jenny and Donna were all diagnosed with breast cancer at a young age. Today, Belinda, Donna and Jenny are bravely sharing their stories in the hope it raises awareness, encourages others to have regular checkups and inspires other women and their families and friends who currently are facing or supporting someone with a diagnosis. I hope you enjoy this chat. I'd like to hand over to Belinda to introduce herself.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Belinda Chapman and I'm a commercial lawyer that works in the Canberra office here at Maddocks. I'm also married with four beautiful girls between the ages of 13 and 17, and we've got a little dog named Betty as well.
Thanks, Belinda. Jenny, would you like to introduce yourself?
Pleasure. Thanks for having me, Alicia. So my name's Jenny O and I'm the HR Director of Australia and New Zealand at Jacobsdouw Egberts, which is a bit of a mouthful, but essentially it's a global coffee company with our head office over in Amsterdam. I was diagnosed with breast cancer at 37 and I'm absolutely delighted to be able to share my experiences with you all today.
Thank you so much for coming and sharing with us, Jenny. Donna, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Alicia. My name is Donna Paredes. I'm a project director and architect in the construction industry, currently working as an ANZ lead for the high-tech sector and delivering for our global clients across ANZ and Asia Pacific as part of the global team. I've been an ambassador for breast cancer for the last 12 years, as I'm a bit of a veteran, having gone through it 3 times since 2008. And yeah, happy to share my story with you guys today.
Thank you so much. Welcome. What I thought would be really interesting for our listeners today is if you could tell us a little bit about how you discovered you had breast cancer. Was it a lump? Was it something else? Would be interested to hear about how old you were and what else was going on in your life at the time. Donna, would you like to start with that, given that you've given us a little insight already?
Okay, actually, well, I mean, obviously mine's been a bit of a long journey. So back in 2008, and I think it was an interesting time because back then the whole pink ribbon thing was just kind of kick-starting. So it was at the time when Jane McGrath was actually diagnosed. So there was all sorts of publicity happening. There was every bus I think I went past had the pink ribbon, and your drink bottles and everything else that you came across was breast cancer. So it's literally today for me, 12 years ago, that's diagnosed, and obviously found the lumps all 3 occasions myself. And it was, I suppose it was definitely a raising awareness thing, and that's why I'm sort of an advocate for that now. So it prompted me to go to my doctor and basically say, look, can I go and get a test? And she said to me at the time, oh, no, you're too young. So I was only 39 at the time. And lo and behold, about a month later, I found a lump myself. So I was in the shower. And I suppose I'm one of the lucky ones in that it was quite easy to detect. So it was a lump. And so obviously straight off to the specialists to check. But I think one of the key things for me, and this message today, I suppose, as well, is that after doing tests, I did mammograms and ultrasounds, and the mammograms were actually clear. So the mammogram said, no, there's nothing wrong. The ultrasounds actually said that there was an issue with my left breast. And I walked into the Sydney Breast Clinic, spent a whole day there, and got an amazing nurse who actually decided to listen to me and said, where is it that you, because I said, look, no, it's not on the left side, it's on my right, and here it is right here. And so she trusted my intuition. So one of the biggest things for me, I suppose, is me knowing my body, what's not normal, and she listened to me and went with that. Had she not done that, I probably wouldn't be sitting here today, because I was literally in for surgery pretty much within a couple of days after that. So I suppose not to go into too much detail, but I've gone through 6 surgeries as part of my journey. I've had a full mastectomy and reconstruction. I've gone through radiation and a lot of hormone treatments, which a lot of the girls would have gone through as well. And for me, I think the fear that we all live with and the anxiety and depression that often comes with this journey as well, sort of threw me into wanting to support and do that side of things, because within 5 years I literally had the second round, and again a couple of years ago a third time round. But again, I know my body, and it's almost a new norm for me, so I'm quite comfortable with finding those things. So yeah.
Gosh, thanks for sharing that, Donna. That's a long journey. Jenny, can you tell us a little bit about how you discovered that you had breast cancer?
Sure. And you know, like Donna, it was out of the blue. It was a bit of a surprise. So my diagnosis was actually almost a year ago now. So I'm 2 weeks shy of a year. I was on a holiday. So I'd flown from Sydney to Atlanta, and I was visiting one of my girlfriends who also works in HR, who just relocated to Atlanta. So I jumped on a plane over there, spent a week there, had fun. And then from Atlanta, I was flying to San Francisco, which was my next destination. And I just absent-mindedly reached down when I was on the plane because my chest was a bit itchy. I felt a bit hot. And I just happened to scratch in the exact spot where this big, jagged, hard lump was. And I mean, it was unmistakably abnormal. It was right there at the top of my right breast. And I just knew in that moment that something was really wrong. So, you know, like you, Donna, I trusted my intuition. As soon as I landed, I, jumped on the Wi-Fi at my hotel and booked an appointment with my GP, who conducted an examination and agreed that it was out of the ordinary, and again went through the same sort of stuff that you did. So I had the biopsies, the ultrasounds, and within a few days was confirmed with early stage yet aggressive breast cancer. So hormone receptor positive and HER2 positive breast cancer. Unlike Donna, I started with chemo. So I had 5 months of chemo, which took place at the Chris O'Brien Lifehouse here in Sydney. And those guys saved my life. I'm forever in debt to the amazing doctors and specialists that have taken care of me. So 5 months of chemo, and we'll talk more about that another time. But it was hard, would be the summary. Had a lumpectomy, which is basically where you get to keep your breast intact and the cancer bit is removed. And then after that, I've had 5 weeks of radiation treatment, and I'm still in active treatment. So every 3 weeks, I get an injection right into my thigh. And I take an everyday tablet called tamoxifen, which is, a tablet a day to keep that cancer away. I'm one of the lucky ones. One, because I found it at a stage where I could have a chance of a successful treatment plan. And I did in fact have success. So instead of saying I have cancer, I'm really lucky to be able to sit here in front of you today, albeit virtually, and say I had cancer. So I had a complete pathological response to my chemo, a successful surgery. And although I'm not loving the hot flushes from tamoxifen, that's a small price to pay for being able to sit here in front of all of you today and be able to raise awareness about how to look after your own health, and really, as you say, Donna, trust that intuition when you know that something's not quite right.
Thank you, Jenny. That's a really important message to share. Belinda, can you tell us a little bit about your discovery?
Yeah, so I'm probably quite similar to Jenny. I was 39 at the time, and to be honest, I hadn't even thought about checking. I had no family history. I now have come to realise that was quite a naive attitude to this whole thing. When I reflect on my diagnosis, similar to Jenny, I remember having a constant itch at the bottom of my right boob for a couple of months. I didn't actually think anything of it at the time, but I do recall being in the shower one day and scratching so hard that the skin was almost bleeding raw. Anyway, it was around about my 4th child's birthday in September 2017. And I was lying in bed on a Sunday evening, and I kind of brushed my hand past that area, and like Jenny, I just felt this lump. I pressed on the lump and noticed it was, not just it was a proper lump. So I got my husband to check, and he agreed. I just remembered that night lying in bed, and I Googled, and it said, it's probably a cyst. So I went to bed. I kind of didn't sleep that well, but I knew that my gut feeling, like the others, I had to go get this checked. So I booked myself into the GP. I went into the GP, and he said he didn't think it was anything sinister. And I was like, oh, phew. But he did send me to have an ultrasound. So the next day I booked myself in and went in during my lunch break, and the people that did it weren't particularly, they weren't sort of in a position to be able to give me a proper diagnosis of such or say too much, and they just said, look, we don't have the proper breast person here today, you'll have to come back tomorrow. And that sort of like, panic button was pushed, and I was like, hang on. And I can remember going back to my office that afternoon and just sort of sitting there in shock, like just sitting there not being able to say anything to anyone or do anything. Anyway, I went back again the next day with my husband, and they did an ultrasound and they did the biopsy at the same time. And the doctor at that point could tell us it didn't look good, and that was because it had like a jagged edge around it. It wasn't smooth. So this was all by the Wednesday from finding the lump on the Sunday. They rushed my pathology results through because it was sort of in between here in Canberra when we used to have 2 long weekends in a row, and they didn't want me obviously to be sitting on this for, with lots of people shut down over that time. So by the Friday afternoon, I had the results. My GP called me, and, I know in my gut that it wasn't going to be good. So the news didn't come as a shock, but I was in shock. I don't know about the others, but that weekend I was just complete shock. I was sort of like functioning like a bit of a robot. And I remember at the time my husband contacted someone who put me in touch with a complete stranger who'd been through breast cancer 12 months prior. And she just spoke to me on the phone. I've never met her to this day, and just had so many comforting, positive words for me that enabled me to then, for the rest of the weekend, be able to eat and have a little bit of sleep. And then the following week was just a whirlwind of scans and appointments with various members of my medical team. And within 2 weeks after that, I'd started chemo. Sort of like, on reflection, one of those moments that you hear about where you're sitting outside of your body and they're talking about somebody else. And I can tell you now, that's exactly how it felt for me at the time. I just could barely function. I had to have my husband with me, and I'd highly recommend that you have a support person with you when you're going through this, because, you go from having a normal life one day to the next, just being, in complete shock and not being able to process really very much at all. So that was sort of my journey. I had the chemo, and then I had surgery after 3 months, and then I had radiation when the surgery had healed, and I've since had about 3 surgeries to sort of correct things and whatnot. So that's me up until that was 4 years ago.
Wow, thanks, Belinda. You talked there about the shock that you felt on your diagnosis, and I know that people deal with that kind of. I'm sure that everyone goes through shock. That must be a really typical initial response. And then I guess after that, people will deal with, what they do with that differently in different cases. So you've talked about, talking to someone else and how that helped you. Donna, I know that you, are really passionate about mentoring other women who've had breast cancer as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how that's kind of been part of your coping mechanism with dealing with the journey that you've had?
Yeah, thanks, Alicia. And actually, Belinda, you were saying that someone put you onto a person that was a complete stranger. Exactly the same thing happened to me as well.
Yeah.
And I just remember, like you said, when you get that diagnosis, and for me, it's one of those, going to the cancer bubble and everything, just you can't remember anything that's happening after that. My mum was there and she was writing things down, and she's going, oh, no, it's not cancer. And she was in complete denial. And once they told me, oh, we're going to remove your breast and do all that sort of thing, all I remember is being in the bathroom with my mum and crying and not really knowing, how to deal with this. And as you said, it happens so quickly. You don't really have time to process. Like I had them telling me, we're putting him in hospital in 2 days' time. You've got to decide, do you want to rebuild your breast? Do you want to have a mastectomy and leave that? Do you want to do radiation first? And so you're just so overwhelmed.
Yes.
And I actually went for it because I'm a very face-to-face person. I went and had a coffee with this lady, and she was a nurse, and she just went through very methodically all the different things and what to expect. And for me, I like to know what I'm dealing with. So it doesn't matter what it is. I could deal with the diagnosis, but knowing what I was coming up against was a massive thing for me. So, for my journey, I suppose I had another contentious issue in that I was in an abusive relationship with my husband at the time as well. So I didn't really have the support that I needed the whole way through my recovery. The support that I got at the time was people like I went and joined YWCA Encore as a patient initially to try and recover because I was suffering quite severe PTSD and depression, which a lot of us obviously go through at different levels. And they would seriously, I feel like they just saved my life. You know, like Jenny was saying about the guys at the Chris O'Brien Lifehouse. These people that support you are like your family. They're your lifeline, right?
There's a whole community out there you don't know about until you go through this, isn't there?
There's a lifeline there that we just don't know about. And these women were at Encore, so I went through the whole class with them and felt so supported that I then decided, yep, this is it. After 6 weeks of surgery, I'm throwing myself into becoming a facilitator. My surgeon started giving my number out to everybody. So I'd go along with people to chemo, people that didn't have friends or support. I'd just go and visit them in the hospital. You know, I'd go and have a cup of coffee and they'd touch my reconstructed boob to see what it feels like. Which sounds really bizarre, but at the time it's kind of, you're a bit of a guinea pig. And I just felt like there was so many times. There was one woman in particular who I had quite a traumatic response because I didn't really know what to expect with the reconstruction. And it was a 10-hour surgery. You know, it was a massive thing. They did the mastectomy and then rebuilt at the same time. And so when I came out of the surgery, the doctors don't really tell you very much, you know. And that's when I went into a panic, and that's when I had that stress response, I suppose. And so as I started to support other women, you know, the first thing I'd say to them is look out for the truck or the semi-trailer, you know. And the first woman that I supported, I went in to visit her. She'd had a double mastectomy, and she was talking to the doctor as I walked in, and she said, "Can you get the number plate of the semi-trailer that just came by?" And we both just started laughing. And so I felt like, okay, that's my gift. What I've gone through and what I wasn't prepared for, I'm a great communicator. I can share that with everybody else. So that's and that was really healing for me. So I've been doing that for the last 12 years, I suppose, for lots and lots of cancer patients, domestic violence and depression as well. Some cancer patients and some completely not related. But I think I know Jenny's like doing all sorts of crazy podcasts and looks like she's doing breast cancer stuff every other day on her Instagram, and it's amazing. You know, we're all sharing this awareness and using our skill set to try and connect with people and let them know that there is support out there. So I literally will meet someone randomly in the office or through work or even in the supermarket, and people will connect me and I'll say, oh, a friend of mine's going through breast cancer, and I'll go, okay, here's my number. Let's grab a cup of coffee. Because that little chat, like you said, Belinda, just changed your whole perspective.
Look, I went from I hadn't eaten for about 3 days and barely slept to jumping in the car with my husband and driving up to the Fishwick markets here in Canberra and buying some beautiful fish for dinner and eating it. So it just changed. It was a turning point, really.
Oh, that's amazing.
You can change someone's journey together. Yeah.
Amazing. So, Donna, thank you for that. And you mentioned some of the work that Jenny's doing. Jenny, can you expand on that a little bit for us?
Yeah, love to. And, you know, like Donna, I've tried to, I guess, 1, find my tribe, and 2, create, I suppose, as much support and awareness for other people, predominantly women, but it can, you know, impact both men and women who are experiencing breast cancer. So, you know, digital native, I suppose, not so much as my youngest brother, but anyway, I am still only 38. So to be honest, I didn't really like the idea of going to a face-to-face support group, and I didn't know anyone else my age that was experiencing breast cancer. When I would walk into the hospital, I'd be like, everyone's old. This is so weird. Why are they looking at me? Are they looking at me because I'm young or because I still have my hair? Of course, I did go on to lose it quite quickly. So I basically thought, well, you know, I can't really connect to this whole environment that I'm in. I'm not a face-to-face support group type person. I looked on a few Facebook groups online, but frankly, I found them depressing and alarmist. So I thought, right, well, if you can't find what you're looking for, you go and make it yourself. So I did. So I started an Instagram page, which then evolved into a podcast and who knows what else, as Donna mentioned. I have an Instagram which is called Oh It's Cancer, and a podcast by the same name. And I basically started that to try and bring awareness to the realities, the harsh realities that many people that undergo breast cancer face. What I found when I scrolled through the feeds of some of the other, breast cancer organisations was a lot of blonde, happy women with young, beautiful children sitting around looking inspirational. And frankly, I couldn't relate to any of that. As it stands now, I am single. Like Donna, I'm also divorced. And I was faced with the prospect of exploring fertility options right before chemo. So, at a point in time when I didn't know whether I was going to live or die, and I was faced with a very intensive chemo regime starting, you're also asked about, are you planning to have children? Are you planning to remarry? Are you planning on starting a family? Because they're all issues that you need to face quite quickly, again, as a younger woman facing breast cancer. So I started unpacking in unfiltered detail what my experiences were. So, the good old selfie featured a lot, and I quickly built up, I'd say a modest but highly engaged community of women who I draw so much strength from. And you know what? I'm damn glad that I did that, because I was then going through chemo and then surgery and radiation through COVID. So that sense of isolation that could have possibly been even, I suppose, worse if I didn't have my own little tribe by then, was somewhat eased by the fact that I was able to have a direct voice and dialogue with many women one-on-one, but also en masse through both of those communication methods as well. So in addition to that, I've obviously active supporter of the Sydney Breast Cancer Foundation, Burpees for Boobs, get on it. And I'm also on the consumer representative panel for Genesis Care, which is the healthcare group that provided me with my radiation treatment over at the Mater here in Sydney as well. Done lots of these type of moments as well, again, because I believe that any opportunity that we have to use our voice and really, I suppose, shed light on what is a fairly traumatic experience, no matter how you look at it, your life does change. As I said, any opportunity to, I suppose, talk about that and bring some colour to this experience, I think, is worthwhile.
Thank you, Jenny. You just mentioned then, that it's life changing, and a major traumatic event like that, undoubtedly changes everyone's life. What would you say is different in your attitude to life now post diagnosis, Jen?
Yeah, really good question. And I think from some perspectives, I was just talking about this with a friend the other day. From some perspectives, I think for me, at the core of me as a human, have I changed? Actually, no. And that was really quite empowering, actually, to realize that the trajectory that I had my life on, and the beliefs I had, the decision-making processes and the values that I hold dear to my heart, they've actually remained intact. And I thought, nice revelation number one. The thing that has changed for me, I suppose, is that I'm not taking my health for granted as much as I possibly have done in the past. As I said, I was 37. Let's be frank, I like a wine on the weekend, sometimes during the week too. I still do that, by the way. But I was probably a little bit more lax in terms of, my gym, my walking, what I was eating. So I'm not going to say that I've become one of those super duper healthy green smoothie type people, because that would be a lie, but I'm a lot more conscious of the choices that I make, not just in terms of nutrition and exercise, but also from, I suppose, a physical and mental health overall perspective. So, Donna and I were just messaging a little bit earlier and basically saying, slow down, girl. I suppose, forcing myself.
It reminds me.
Yeah.
Me when I was at the front end of the thing. Yeah. No, it's fantastic.
It's so important, isn't it? Not just through breast cancer, but I think through what all of us in the world who have experienced through COVID. Sometimes mentally it just gets a little bit too much. So appreciating that sometimes as people, we just need a bit of downtime in order to recharge those batteries is so important. So sometimes saying no is the best thing that you can do for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Donna, you've now had three rounds of treatment. Have you found that you've got a different attitude to life post initial diagnosis, and has that changed as you've had, multiple diagnoses?
Absolutely. I feel like I'm a walking miracle, first of all. I think the first time, obviously, I was like Jenny and Belinda, quite young, so I was 39, different perspective, but I had young kids then, so I didn't have to face some of the things that Jenny was facing. But I was the probably self-sacrificing mum, and I was, and in my work ethic as well. So I would do 80, 90 hours a week. I was an absolute machine, which I probably still am, I think. But it started to, I think it came from one of the doctors said to me, look, what is it that you love to do? And I couldn't remember who I was, to be honest. My whole life was about my family and everybody else. I'd never really taken the time to look after myself. So for the first time, it was self-love. Obviously, I think as the girls probably have similar, you're in shock, and obviously there's that fear of facing your own mortality and all those things as well. Now, my mum put me in touch with a Catholic priest who said, "Are you ready to go?" And I went, "Hell no."
Oh my God. Far out.
No, I'm not. So I think the first time there was a lot of fear, a lot of fear, and obviously going into major surgeries, having my breast removed and having to deal with all of that. So, and I didn't take time out. I only took 6 weeks off and threw myself back into work, which is my coping mechanism, I suppose, as well. I think the second time round, again, there was a fear because there's that perception, okay, second round, okay, this is it now. I might not make it through this one. So there was that realization for the second round. But there was also, and this is going to sound a bit bizarre, but there's a comfort. And especially the third time round for me, there's almost a comfort level for me in that I know this. So people say to me, are you afraid? And I'm like, no, I've got this. And my daughter did a celebration of life party for me. First time in the whole 12 years was in the last round, which was 2018. And it was really moving. She got up and she did a speech and she just said, look, today's the best party I've ever been to because it means my mum fought really hard to be here with me today. And it was very moving because I'd been in survival mode for so long, and I'm a fighter, like I'll just keep getting back up. And I never really considered dying as an option, which obviously we all face it and we all have to think about it, and it's scary, and you have to talk about your potential funeral if something happens and something doesn't go right. So there is that dark side of it that you do have to deal with. But I think it's just given me the most amazing perspective of life, because I looked at this room of people who are my nearest and dearest, and like you said, your soul tribe, who's now are probably more tight-knit people that I really value in my life. And I just went, oh my God, look at all the love that I have in this room. And I'm so lucky that I'm here. And my perspective now is every day I live it as if it was my last. And I feel like that's a gift for me, because I wouldn't normally do that. I'd be focused on, like a machine doing things. And I try and find that balance now, which I think is a massive change for me.
Oh, thank you, Donna.
Yeah.
Belinda, how about you?
Yeah.
Have you found a change in attitude post-diagnosis?
Absolutely. I think I was just living my life under a bit of a rock before this happened, in terms of, taking everything for granted. And wow, our family life is so much richer for this experience. I see my cancer not as a negative. It's probably the most positive thing that's ever happened to me. A turning point for us, and so much good has come from it. So, I did work through my treatment, and that helped me, just to keep my life, as normal as possible. But I had, great people around me that gave me enough work that I wasn't, going to smash myself. And so I feel like my career's thrived as a result of cancer. My husband started his own business. It was something he's always wanted to do. And he's, cultural values for that business are based around our experience going through this. We're just living in a beautiful home that brings us so much joy. We do not waste a minute of our life doing things we don't enjoy. We surround ourselves with people we enjoy hanging out with. And I think that I'm a lot braver than I used to be before this. So I give things a go. I don't think I'm a mean person, but I certainly don't do things that I'm not comfortable with, or if there's something I'm not happy about, I'll race that where I may not have had. I'm doing really fun things like I've taken up cycling recently, which is so addictive and so much fun. And I just don't sit around anymore. Like if I go on a holiday, I get out and breathe the air and enjoy every single season. So for me, it's a positive. I'm happy in my work. I'm happy in my life, and like Donna, like you just live it. Like it's there to be lived, which is a blessing. A lot of
Oh,
people
that's
don't see life through that lens.
Yeah,
So
that is
yeah,
wonderful. And you've had a lot of great support. You mentioned in there, Belinda,
yeah,
having the support of your colleagues at work.
yeah,
What do you think was the best support that you received? I'm
oh,
kind of coming at this from the point of view for
yeah,
the listeners who don't have a diagnosis, but so
yep,
many of us are touched in some way by breast cancer, having
mm,
family or friends who are having or about to go through this. Um,
yeah.
what sorts of things did you value that people who don't have
Throw away.
breast cancer could use as a way to support, some ideas to support their loved ones?
Yep. So my cousin Mary Claire, for example, she sent me pajamas like every couple of weeks, and they weren't just normal pajamas. They were really nice, expensive, lovely pajamas. And when you go through this journey, you do find yourself in hospital a fair bit. And I just felt otherwise my health was terrible, but I felt good in those pajamas, which was just so practical and lovely. So if you do ever have someone around you that gets cancer, I'd highly recommend that as a gift. My auntie and my cousin used to cook us meals all the time and bring them around. Caroline, my boss, used to drop around with books and groceries, and just the practical everyday
Some of
things
the
like that are
practical stuff.
amazing. And even at the workplace, everybody made me feel so comfortable. It was quite traumatic having to wear the wig for the first time, and I can remember going to a meeting with Catherine, and she just made me feel so good in the car on the way. And it gave me that confidence to go in and just do that first meeting and realize that not everybody's going to notice that I have a wig. And yeah, I guess it's just, you know, being, if you've got a colleague that just wants to get on with work, you just let them get on with it and you don't have to go on about it. And that really, really helped me. So
Oh, that's fantastic. So Donna, something in what Belinda said there resonated with you. What would you like to expand on there?
Yeah, I was going to say this. Everyone asks me because I've obviously been a support person to lots of people,
yeah,
and they ask, what can I do for them? And people will obviously ask you the question, what can I do? But then it never goes anywhere. So I always recommend, doing something specific, like whether it's can I help by, like you said, Belinda, bringing the shopping, or can I pick your kids up from school? And it's all relative to that particular person and what they need at the time. So some people might have young kids, I'll pick them up from childcare for you, and that just takes a massive load off us because we're trying to deal with because it does happen like a whirlwind, doesn't it? Just kind of all consuming. You're in this bubble and you can't really deal with very much else, and everything else outside of you, and you're trying to pay bills and do the usual things. And I mean, look, Alicia, obviously you're part of my high school group. They've been the most amazing support to me. Like as a support group, there's 100 women on there, and a few of us have had breast cancer. But we all sort of get on board and help each other with specific things. So the girls raised money for me when I was struggling with my third round. I was between jobs, and so I couldn't take leave. I couldn't take time off. I couldn't pay the bills. I was literally, diagnosed. Tested on the Monday, diagnosed on the Wednesday, surgery on Thursday. And on the following Monday, I was bandaged up, walking into a new job, and nobody knew what was going on. So that support that I got from the girls, and another time it was food. Remember, you guys sent me food vouchers. That was just the most amazing thing because, oh my God, I don't have to think about cooking dinner tonight.
mm-hmm.
That was just a massive thing. With the young ones, it might be they'll give them tickets for the kids to go to the movies, or it's not just you as well. It's the pressure that it puts on the family as well.
The whole family.
Yeah. So I find that sometimes if people can help you with the other kids or the other members of your family, or, if you're single, friendships or whatever it is you need, everyone's obviously has a very different journey. But specifically ask that person, what is it that you need from me?
Yeah, right. So Jenny, what would be your perspective on that? What support, for you in a different context there from Belinda and Donna? What did you find really supportive?
Yeah, there was a few particular things. So first of all, I hate cooking, so it's quite a plus that my sister lives just down the road and likes cooking and is great at it. So she brought around a lot of meals. I'll speak specifically about the COVID element because it's still relevant to us now. So when you're going through chemo, you're immune compromised, which means you basically need to go into self-isolation permanently until your immune system returns, because basically your odds of having an unfavorable outcome if you catch COVID skyrocket through that period. So for me, I think we all remember when COVID kind of finally hit our shores here in Australia. I was in lockdown in my own home, basically as soon as I read that email from my oncologist, to the point where, I didn't even have enough food in the fridge and I couldn't go out. I couldn't order it online because, of course, Coles and Woolies online wasn't quite working at that stage. So what was practical for me was people actually going and doing my shop for me, and then they'd kind of fling it through the door so that we'd keep a safe distance. I had my sister, as I said, dropping off meals. But the thing, frankly, that meant the most to me was the friends and family who actually bothered to check in, just saying hi, tell me some normal stuff that's going on, if you can say that anything's been normal this year. Not just at the time of diagnosis and through that, I suppose, really bad part of treatment, which was early on, but ongoing. So what I found is, some of those people that were quite active and in contact at the start feels like, it's gone on too long now and the support's kind of dropped away, which has been an interesting revelation. I don't know if you ladies have also experienced that. I wouldn't say I had a huge group of friends, pre-cancer, because I'm quite particular about where I spend my time, but it's certainly become, I think, Belinda, you might have mentioned, even more tight-knit now that you've gone through one of these life-changing type moments when you realise who's really there for you in the long haul. So it could be as simple as, sending a quick text, or, Donna, it sounds like you had some kind of online support group as well. I had a big WhatsApp going, which I then, migrated over to the Insta page. But really just checking in at different moments and appreciating that, as you say, ask the person what they need. Don't assume you know what they need or how they're feeling or where they're at. Breast cancer ain't breast cancer. It's a complex cancer for a reason. There are so many different subtypes. There are so many different experiences. It's still 53 women every day being diagnosed in Australia, and I can guarantee you every single one of them will have a different experience through cancer because of who we are as people, how we respond mentally, our personal circumstances, and health conditions prior. So always ask the person and stay in touch.
I think Jenny, what Jenny was saying too is that the system tends to spit you out after your active treatment, and so you do have this, you're so supported all the way through, and then you get spat out the other end and, you're okay now, you're cancer free.
You lose your safety net.
God. And it's really just the start of your journey, and that whole, Jenny was saying one of her Instagram things, about life. It's the new you that you then have to cope with, your mental health, your physical body, all the image issues that you're dealing with. So there's so much more of it that you need support for. Like, it's an ongoing thing.
We could probably do a whole extra podcast just on the mental health side of it and seeing psychologists and stuff like that.
Oh, I have actually. I've done one around cancer psychology, but I was just going to jump in and make a quick, I suppose, reflection on one of those awkward things that I hear so many times, which is, very well-meaning friends or family making comments about your physical appearance. So, oh, you're looking so well. You must be going well. Oh, you look beautiful with short hair.
Yeah.
Not appropriate.
No.
Really well intended. But comments on how you look when you're undergoing cancer treatment are probably the worst and most superficial comments that I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah.
And it depends where you're at on the journey as well, because I know that I'm probably less reactive to certain things now, but in the start, you're so fragile and vulnerable, and you're just getting to know your new body and all that as well. So it's a very different space.
Yeah, absolutely. And particularly, given social norms about women and women's beauty, so much of it is focused on breasts and hair.
Oh gosh,
and through breast cancer, where it affects breasts, and if you have chemo hair, it's very triggering for a lot of women. So
I'll be honest with you, ladies, I spent, Donna, most of that 30 minutes getting ready was just trying to get my hair to sit right. So I'm facing the regrowth situation right now. I'm half Asian, so I've had dead straight hair my whole life, and now I've got
She's got
curls.
curls.
Chemo.
My hair grew back exactly the same. I didn't get the curls. I really wanted that because I loved my perms in the 90s, and I was hoping to get curly hair.
It's
It
really hard to manage.
didn't happen.
And
So,
I bring it up because although, I am, I think I look pretty good having experienced what I have, but I still feel utterly self-conscious about the whole short hair situation because, as you say, of these, I suppose, inbuilt norms, whether it's in my head or perceived, around how I want to look and how I should look and what pretty looks like. And I hate how superficial that sounds, but frankly, that's how I feel.
It's interesting that you feel that way at this point because I felt the same as you, and I used to walk around the lake in 40 degrees summer with this wig on and my daughter worrying that it was going to blow off. But now 4 years down the track, I'd probably be mentally a bit stronger and not as ashamed of not having hair. Like it's really weird. But then again, I'm not. It's probably like later. It was really bad at the time, and you forget how bad it was. And it's,
but it's part of your identity as well, And I know that, like, when I was tackling the decision on whether to reconstruct the breast or not, my little son, who was 7 at the time, sort of said, "Oh, Mum, it'd be pretty sad, looking down and your shirt doesn't quite fall right, and you wouldn't really feel like a woman," he said to me. This is coming from a 7-year-old through the mouth of babes, and it was because it doesn't matter what, how big they are or whatever it is. It's your femininity, isn't it? It's part of your womanhood, and your hair is obviously part of your identity as well. Like, I mean, it's like you said. I've counselled a lot of people through depression, and it's mainly around the things they can no longer do and how they feel about themselves post cancer, not while you're going through.
You're grieving part of your body when you go through something like this.
Absolutely.
Never the same.
Yeah, never the same. That's right. And so, you've all talked about, highs and lows, I guess, of the mental health struggles that you have had, as well as the physical health struggles. Just to wrap up, I wonder if you could each give a little piece of advice to other women who are going through breast cancer treatment about how you pick yourself back up. Like, no one can be strong and positive all the time. But what would you say around resilience and how you go through ride through those moments or those periods of darkness and pick up again to that strength and power? Belinda, can you start with that?
Okay, so my biggest tips: surround yourself with positive people and don't Google. I had a couple of my medical team at various points tell me I'm going to be okay and gave me positive news. And my psychologist said, put those words in your head when you're feeling down or things are not, you just got to hold on to the positive things. If you're going through chemo, don't eat anything you like because you will hate it. And look forward to the day when life will get boring again. My breast care nurse always said this to me, and I'm thankful every day for my boring life.
Thanks, Belinda. Jenny, what would you say?
I'd say to take it one day at a time, and I really do mean that. I remember particularly through chemo, it was like a roulette. Am I going to have a migraine? Is it going to be a rash? What's it going to be today? But I knew that come the end of the day, I'd have a tiny bit of sleep and I'd wake up feeling just that little bit better. So rest is number one. The second one is to really stay true to how you're feeling. What I mean by that is don't be fooled by people saying, "Oh, you'll be fine. You'll pull through it. You're so brave. You're a warrior." Do you know what? You probably don't feel like a warrior at a lot of moments, and allow yourself to feel like crap and to go, "Do you know what? I'm having a really bad day. Everyone leave me alone." Turn your phone off, get off social media, and just listen to what's important to you. So if your body's telling you need a rest, have a rest. If you want to go eat a tub of ice cream, go eat a tub of ice cream. Just be kind to yourself and take it at your own pace. You're under no obligation to be, the beacon of hope for everyone around you. You just need to get through it, and you will.
Thank you, Jenny. Donna, what would you like to finish up with?
I think I resonate with both of those, especially what Jenny said about taking it one day at a time. I think I did very similar to Belinda. I Googled everything. That my first diagnosis, oh my God, I read this book and I was already writing my obituary. Because I read from the book from the beginning to the end, and I realised I didn't actually need to deal with any of that, and my journey was going to be completely different. So only deal what you have to deal with at that point in time, and break it down to small bits so you're not overwhelmed. So that was a big thing. I think the other key thing for me in my journey is self-love, which I never had before. So make sure that you are, like you said, taking time out, whatever that might be. I used to go and sit by the water, so I'd go to Cronulla and sit there for 2 hours and just reflect with a cup of coffee and not feel guilty for taking time away from the kids, you know. So make that time for yourself and self-love. And yeah, it's okay to have bad days. Like my daughter used to say to me, well, in reflection, said to me this last round that she never talked to me about how she was feeling because she didn't want to upset me. And I had to say to her, well, when you see me cry, it's my way of releasing. It's not that I'm not coping. It's just the way that I deal with things. And it just means I'm doing this so that I can then move on. So, you know, find your way of coping, because as you said, Jenny, this too will pass, you know, and there is light at the end of the tunnel. And look to those people. Like, I find the people that I support normally say the biggest help for them was that they see me, you know, excelling and how well I'm doing at work, and they can see me living and my life now, and know that there is an end to it, and that there's a new beginning waiting as well. So yeah, and that's something positive to look forward to.
Yeah.
Great advice, all of you. Thank you so much to all of you, Belinda, Donna and Jenny, for sharing your stories today. It's really important and inspirational. And thank you so much for your time.